Meeting to order. First thing is into closed session. Be it resolved that the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia hereby enters into a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following. Section 2.2-3711, 1. Discussion, consideration, or interviews for prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific officers, appointees, or employees of any public body. 1. Community Service Board, Judy Diggs, applicant. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Vizikowski? Aye. Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Entered in closed meeting. Do I have a motion to come out of closed meeting?
So moved.
Have a
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Demotts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fitchukowski?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
So now in our regular session, certification of closed meeting, whereas the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to the affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires certification by the Board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia hereby certifies to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification resolution applies, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion conveying the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Demotts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fitchukowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
At this time, I'll ask if our County Administrator, Mr. Meadows, would lead us in an invocation and pledge of allegiance.
Yes, if we could rise, please, for a moment of silence, and then I'll lead us in the pledge. Let us pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
Okay, up next, we have our public hearings. The first is the joint public hearing for VDOT Secondary 6-Year Plan for FY 2022-23 through FY 2027-2028.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I believe David Clark is with us this evening from VDOT. David, do you want to come up and make any comments about this activity we do each year?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. I'll do a few comments, just a little bit of background on the 6-year plan process and what exactly this hearing is designed to accomplish. And I'll go a little bit over our draft construction budget also, which is the money that we know we're going to have, I'm pretty sure we're going to have this upcoming fiscal year, and how that's being proposed to be split between the projects that are currently on the plan. This is a secondary road construction 6-year plan. This is construction allocations for Montgomery County for secondary roads. Those numbered 600 and above. There's a separate public hearing district-wide. In fact, it's going to be this Thursday down in Roanoke. That's to hear comments from the public on primary roads, around it's like 460 and 114 and Route 11, as well as interstate projects. Most of those projects are developed between VDOT and county staff, or requests for project and done through the Smart Scale application process, but there's still a public hearing held because that's it's important to get face-to-face comments from people, and it gives the chance for the Secretary of Transportation, who we have a new Secretary of Transportation now, and Commonwealth Transportation Board members to get out to the 9 districts within the state and do these public hearings. So that's on the 12th down in Roanoke at the, I think it's the Valley View.
Valley View Holiday Inn.
Yep. I believe it begins at 4 o'clock. But tonight we're here to discuss secondary roads. I want to do the draft construction budget first. I'll go through that, and then I'll do the draft priority list, which is basically last year's 6-year plan with the project that's finished, taken off. Total allocations for secondary construction are around $460 $77,000 is what the latest number I had. That tends to change slightly. It'll be in that range. It'll be between 450 and 500,000 probably by the time the fiscal year begins. That's enough for us to get an idea of how to split that money up. Of that allocation, that 477,000, 381,000 is earmarked for unpaved roads with a traffic count of 50 or more per day. The rest of that allocation is about $95,000 in a telecommunication fee distribution that the state collects from telecommunication companies that locate their utilities on VDOT right-of-way and have to pay a fee for doing that. That fee is gathered and split up among all the counties of Virginia on a population basis. So whatever percentage of the population Montgomery County has, that's the percentage of that fee. And that does not have the strings attached to it that the unpaved road allocation does. That could be used on a paved road, or road that's got less than 50 vehicles a day on it. It can be used for just about anything that would be considered, well, we can actually, construction, you can use construction money for maintenance. So whatever the kind of project the county wanted to propose. But as you can also see, it's not a large percentage. And so what we tend to do is just lump that in with the unpaid road money and do those projects, and it lets us go a little quicker. But if something does come up where we need to use construction money, and that's where we've used this for other kind of traffic services, if there's new guardrail that needs to go up, that's where that money can be used for. Things that wouldn't fall under maintenance, anything new kind of stuff. New guardrail would not be maintenance. Signs and very small things, but that's where that telefee allocation comes from. So the proposal for putting that out is the next two projects. We still need a little bit of money on Yellow Sulphur Road. It's complete. I don't know if anyone's driven through that. I think it looks pretty good. It's done now, but there's still a little bit of money left to finish that off. Rural additions, that's where the county, if they so choose, can use secondary construction funds to upgrade, to bring a private road up to state standards, and VDOT will accept it into the state system of maintenance. We've worked on a couple over the years. They tend not to work out real well. A lot of them are private roads for a reason. You got some people that want them public. Other people like living on a private road and don't want to give up their right-of-way. So they aren't very common anymore. But we do put a little bit. You're only allowed to put 5% of your allocation in that. And so again, kind of like the telecommunication fee, you're not accumulating a whole lot of money very fast when you're putting $9,000 a year into a road that's going to cost you, $500,000 to build a half mile of it. So, but it's there because I know in the past we have had citizens come speak and request that their private road be considered for a rural addition. And then we're starting to put some money, some major amount of money on Taylor Hollow, which will be our next big unpaved road project. So that's the draft construction budget. How that 477 is planned on being split up. The draft priority list for the entire 6-year plan does have, we kind of call it priority 0. It's kind of the first thing, and that's that countywide traffic services. That's where that telecommunication fee can go to, these countywide items. You're not paving an unpaved road, you're doing engineering, right-of-way costs. The rural additions come out of that. So our first real project, now that Yellow Sulphur is going to be taken off, would be Taylor Hollow Road, because that's next coming up after the completion of Yellow Sulphur. Craig Mountain Road is number 2. That's just a little bit in the middle. We've got a gap of the hard surface, so we've got just a little 0.3 of a mile to do to tie those ends in. Poplar Hollow off Route 11, Shawsville area, is number 3 on the list. That was added a couple years ago. And then number 4 on the list is Paul School Road, which was added last year, and that's that's about a 2-mile project. That's going to be a long and very expensive project, but that was added last year. So pretty much any of those projects, we haven't spent a lot of money so far on the engineering of Taylor Hollow. We spent a lot of time thinking about what we're going to do with that curve on Taylor Hollow. When we are going to do the low water structure before we start the paving process, and we don't have to wait for the total amount to be accumulated for the whole road to begin that low water structure. But the order of these can be changed by the board, the priority order, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about. They can be dropped. They can, another road could be added. Poplar School could be dropped. Poplar Hollow could be dropped. Any of those could be dropped. There's probably not enough funds to add an additional one, a fifth one on there this year because Poplar School Road is such a, that's at 2 miles is going to take 4 years to get enough money to do that, and we haven't started accumulating money on Poplar School, so probably couldn't add another one. I mean, you could add one, but it would be so far in the future that it would kind of be pointless. So there's your draft priority list. What happens next is the board will hear any comments that anybody might have. If you don't need any resolution tonight necessarily, you could wait and consider whatever comments come in or who speaks this evening. I would like to get a resolution passed next month because that's the end of the fiscal year. We'd like it at the beginning of the new fiscal year. Or if the board is happy with this plan as presented, you could pass a resolution tonight approving the priority list and 6-year plan as presented. So that's all I have.
Well, I do have one person signed up for the public hearing. As I call your name, if you'll come forward, you'll have 4 minutes to speak and address the board. This is our time to listen. We will not respond. And I have a Patricia, is it Kolosky? Kolotowski. Welcome, ma'am. If you'll state your name and address, and you'll have 4 minutes to address the board.
Sure. My name is Patricia Kolotowski. I live at 1580 Taylor Hollow Road, and I mostly came here to say thank you for keeping our road on the list and finally getting to the top of the list. I don't know what they're going to do about that curve either. I don't know if any of you have ever taken a 50% grade curve that goes like 200 degrees back the other direction, but that's not really what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to say thank you for getting that low water structure on there. Until you've spent 22 years living on the far side of a low water structure on a dead-end road, I don't think you can understand how life-changing it's going to be to get that done. No longer having to cancel plans because it's raining, no longer watching the radar all day saying, can I go home? Did I put boots and a hiking stick in my car? Do I have to park at the neighbor's farm and walk the 1.5 miles through the woods, which I've done? And mostly that if you're sick, I don't have to worry about an ambulance being able to come to get to us. We've had farming accidents on our road, and all I can say is thank you, they've happened in the dry, because you can't get an ambulance down there when it's wet. But yeah, and not having to make the decision coming down to that walk crossing when it's covered with water, even if it's covered with this much water, there's a part that washes out on the other side. It's, do I feel like getting wet? Do I feel like seeing how deep it is? Can my vehicle get through this, or am I going to turn around and see if it's going to go down tonight or not? So really, I just wanted to come and say thank you. Please leave at least a low water crossing on there. That's really the most important part of it, but thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't have anybody else signed up, but if anybody would like to come forward for this public hearing on the 6-year secondary plan. Okay. Seeing no one else come forward, do the board members have questions for Mr. Clark? I'll go around the room, okay? I'll start off with Supervisor Shepherd.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Supervisor Bone.
I know last year or the year before you did a traffic count study on Galleon Ridge Road, and we were pleasantly surprised that the count was actually higher than the 50. Is there reason to put a road like that higher on this list because the other roads don't have that amount of traffic count?
I'm not sure what the Galleon Ridge count ended up being. I know Taylor Hollow Probably, Poplar Hollow, they all have well over 100 vehicles a day. I know Taylor Hollow is close to, probably has over 150. I'm not sure the others offhand. Again, Galleon Ridge is a cut-through road, and, you know, you've got businesses on there, so you probably have higher traffic on each end rather than the center, but regardless, cut-through roads are generally good roads to have paved. It's, you know, again, it's up to the board. If it's put on at the end, again, it's going to, you know, be however long it takes us to finish Poff School Road, but the board is free to replace any of these other roads if they so choose.
I'm not familiar with the other, I apologize. I'm obviously familiar with Taylor Hollow. Is Craig Mountain, Poplar Hollow, and Poff School Road, any of those not dead ends?
Are they what?
Not dead ends?
Yeah, Poff School Road is not. Poff School Road cuts all the way through from Route 8 over towards it's kind of the Brush Creek area. Poplar Hollow is a dead-end road. It comes off of Route 11, goes up the mountain through the hollow, and ends at a cul-de-sac. Craig Mountain Road is a very long road, but and there may be a way to get through all the way, but I don't know if you can do it on a state road or not.
When you do pave these roads, you fix the ditches also. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. We used to use a description in the 6-year plan: grade, drain, and stabilize was the thing. And the drain part was key because, yeah, drainage is a big deal. So you try to get a good crown on the road and get ditches, cross pipes, all that kind of thing.
And then turning back to Taylor Hollow, so I know the low water bridge is going to be taken care of, but like the person that just spoke, the cliffs off of the bridge sometimes get washed out, meaning it depends how far you pave to the, you know, for the bridge, because the sides, getting onto the bridge and getting off of the bridge get washed out.
Yeah, it's still going to be a low water structure. We might be able to raise it a little bit.
Or I was just wondering
Yeah.
if you're going to have a lead up,
Yes,
more of
yes.
a lead up and a more of a,
Yeah,
so do you have
Approaches,
a sense
we
of
call
what
those
that is?
approaches,
Yeah, do
yeah.
you have a sense of what those approaches,
No.
the lengths of those approaches?
I'd have to look. I don't know if we've got that on the plan yet or
Okay.
not. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I would add, though, it's good to have somebody from a project that's already on the plan to come to the board and reiterate that they're glad, because I've seen roads dropped from the plan by the board who thinks, well, I guess people don't care whether it's on there or not. So it's good to have somebody come and say, yeah, please keep it on.
Thank you.
Supervisor DeMotts.
Just one question, Craig Mountain Road, being that is 0.3 miles, I'm following kind of the math. Is that roughly $300,000 for that one?
Roughly, yeah. It probably won't be that much. We'll do more of a pave and play, because that particular part isn't that, that's a rule of thumb based on a lot of drainage issues. And width, that's got a fairly decent width. We did a section, the reason there's a 3/10 gap is that we did about a half-mile section several years ago. And the board put it on the 6-year plan, but it was more of a, we had severe dust issues right around where people's houses were. And we did a section there, and we did a section out, and I cannot remember the name of the road. It's up Allegheny Springs, and you take the left as you're going through those old scout camps.
Yeah, that's, you had to put me on a spot here, David.
But actually,
My wife drove a school bus up there.
the road number stays the same. 637 takes a left
Yeah.
right there, and the other one, it goes into Floyd County, and I can't remember the name of the road, but we did a little bit right there too. It was something the board approved to sort of help some people out with kind of dust. So this part that we're talking about, this 3/10, really doesn't have anybody living in it, but it's kind of disorienting for drivers when you have a gap in a road like that. So we just put that on there, and it won't cost $300,000, but it might cost $2.
So that one goes paved, gravel paved.
Yes.
And then, I don't know if you said this in your presentation or not. I apologize if I'm making you repeat yourself. We accumulate the money over the course of several years, and then we do the project. So
Right.
Taylor Hollow, we're putting aside $293,071. So a pretty significant portion of the money, we're putting that aside, and then we'll have to,
Yes, it's got some on it already, but not a lot, and then we're doing about a mile
okay.
of Taylor Hollow. We're not doing the whole thing of Taylor Hollow. We're doing about half of it, I guess.
Okay.
A little over 3/4, but
Do we know
probably
how
not
mu-
quite a mile.
Do we know how much we already have set aside for it?
I don't have that with me, no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And we'll have a little bit left over even after we pay off yellow sulfur with that 175. So then anything left over after yellow
the Taylor
sulfur,
Hollow.
yeah. We won't know till that one's closed out.
And then, do we normally, so when you come next year with the same thing, let's assume that this passes and everything is moving forward, we are able to continue adding to Taylor Hollow's pile. When you come next year, if we had a similar budget, would we be separating the allocation, or would we allocate it all to the next on the list, probably?
It would go to the next one, so we would start putting some on Poplar Hollow.
Okay.
And we can put a little bit on these so that we can just have something, we have to, when we do design work, sometimes we use consultants for that. They work close contact with us, but they have to have a project to charge to. So all these projects have specific numbers within the BDOT accounting system, and when we do work on that project, we charge that project. It's not a lot. The engineering costs aren't a lot, but we'd like to put $50,000-$75,000 on Poplar Hollow here pretty soon, so we can start just doing the preliminary environmental work and other kinds of engineering work.
We won't have to engineer for Craig Mountain, you don't think?
No.
Okay.
I'll probably use, there'll be a little bit, but there is something in that zero account up there, that traffic services. See, it's also called engineering and right-of-way costs. So there's a little bit in that we can always charge to as well.
I was just trying to gauge how long will it be before we can actually do the work on Taylor Hollow. And I know it's kind of a science, but
It won't be next summer, but it might be the summer after that.
great. But the low water bridge already will
We're hoping to get the low water bridge next year.
great. Thank you.
Supervisor Physicality.
Jewel Road.
Jewel, that's it. You got it, yeah.
I knew it would hit me.
I don't know if I'd have got that in a multiple choice, to tell you the truth.
I think your priority list right here is right on target. Taylor Hollow, Poplar Hollow, Poff School Road are all horrible roads. Narrow in so many places, bad curves. I think the time we went out and took the road tour of Poplar Hollow, there was like 3 inches of solid ice going over the road because the drainage issues and what have you. But those are going to be 3 really important projects to work on. And it does take a long time to get it done. And your section there with Craig Mountain Road, I mean, we have several of them that you've done that way. And it's nice to try to connect the gaps because it just a whole lot less potholes, a whole lot less scraping and gravel, and it's just a smart way to go. So
We'll probably do that one with VDOT crews.
Okay.
That little bit of Craig Mountain Road. So
Yeah.
that'll keep the cost down on
and
that
you've got a good crew because
Yeah.
they've done other sections I've seen, and it's very professional, very good. So I like the way it's written now. So thank you.
Supervisor King.
I think we got a good list here, and I appreciate you coming tonight and all. And I know on Poff School Road, I know them people really be excited when it does happen.
Yeah, that would be a good one, yeah.
Maybe next week or something, maybe.
Yeah, we might get, let's start on, maybe a little bit of it.
No, I appreciate it.
Vice Chair Biggs.
I agree with the list too, having been on those roads in previous years. on road trips, definitely. Thank you.
Mr. Clark, thank you for being here tonight. Just to clarify for our citizens so they understand, because the name is a little deceiving when we say 6-year plan.
Yes.
So the 6 years is actually the funding. The 6-year
Exactly.
comes from the funding. And so
Yes.
funding may only come in the last of the 6 years
Correct.
and not the complete funding.
Yeah.
So when Supervisor DeMotts is talking about the portion that we have set aside so that our citizens understand, because they're saying 6 years, and some people it's taken 12 years for a project to move forward. It's the funding source, and as we keep building and each year gaining those monies and funds, it will go to the priority list.
Correct. So if you can imagine a spreadsheet that has the roads listed down the left side and the years across the top, there are 6 years of funding. And I don't know why 6 was picked, decades ago. It just was. Maybe that's how they figured they could accurately predict how much money they might have is 6 years into the future. So you have to have something to put that 6th year on. It usually goes all the way to the right and all the way down. It's the last one. But if you're only putting $50,000 on it, then it's going to take a lot longer than 6 years to do, which is why we try to keep it fairly short. And so hopefully in that 6th year, and it may be that 6th year, but probably the 5th year now for Pop School, because we put it on last year. So it's going to probably start getting money in that 5th year of the 6-year plan, depending on how much Poplar Hollow costs. And so that first allocation for POF School, first significant one, like I said before, we might put a little bit on it so we can do some engineering work, but the first significant amount to start accumulating it's almost a mile long too, I think. To accumulate the $1 million that it's going to take to build POF School, it might be in 4-year chunks of 250 or 3-year chunks. So you might get 300,000 in year 5, another 3 in maybe more in year 6, because then it's moving up. So anyway, you see what I'm getting at. It's only 6 years, like you were saying, because you have to put, just because of our system, you got to tell us where to put the money in that, fictitious 6th year. It's off in the future somewhere.
Thank you. I just wanted our public to understand that
Yeah.
when we call it 6 years, that doesn't mean, that means just the funding.
Right.
And then to complete the project, could take several more years after that 6 year for it to be done. Especially for our public to know that a mile is about $1 million. And right now, the budget allocation is under $500,000.
Yeah.
And I think that is a little bit less than last year's.
Yeah, I
Of
think a
about
little
20,
bit.
25,000 or so, and maybe that'll go up. I do approve of this, or agree with this priority list, especially for those folks on Taylor Hollow Road, when we heard just stories about flooding and how emergency vehicles couldn't get there, and how you have to plan your whole world on if you're going to be able to get home and leave from work and be able to get back to your driveway, that type of thing. I had a question about Yellow Sulphur Road, and I know you had said in some of that money that could be the telecommunications, that can't be for new guardrail, that would just be for maintenance, because I had an issue.
No, new guardrail on the secondary system must be paid for out of the secondary construction allocation, and the only fund that would qualify would be the telecommunication fee, because the others have to go on paved roads. But let's say we were doing a project that on an unpaved road that would include guardrail, then you could.
Okay.
Because it's all part of the same thing.
I had it where I'd forward you a concern of a resident on Yellow Sulphur on the curve where they keep knocking down the fence, and they had asked for possible guardrail or signage to help with that, because
I remember that
people-
now. I'll look into that. I haven't
to
found
see
it.
if that might be something, since they have sent some pictures of several incidents where they keep knocking down the fence on the curve there. That might be, especially since you're getting ready to the completion of Yellow Sulphur Road. But I think this is a good list, and just wanted to make sure the public understand that, because the 6 years is a little deceiving.
It is, yeah.
And it takes some time for all these projects to be completed.
We won't talk about when Yellow Sulphur first made its appearance on the 6-year plan.
At 1990? No.
It was I started in Christiansburg in 93, and it was
Okay.
on the plan in 93.
Yes, so it's made it up to the list now, so very good. Any other follow-up comments or questions?
Just one thing, is any of that infrastructure money, is it available for some of these projects?
Not at this time, no, not for unpaved roads. A lot of that, we're not sure how it's going to go, but a lot of that is federal money, and federal money can't be spent on these kind of roads. Now, what it might do is be able to take the place of some statewide, of some state money that's on a project, and then you could move the state money to something like this, but that would all be, I don't know if that wouldn't necessarily be a General Assembly thing, but I'm sure everyone's going to have a voice in, in how that's spent.
All right, thank you.
But yeah, federal money has to be spent on parts of it's called the federal system, but it has to be spent on roads that are of a certain higher function than an unpaved road, not a local road. It can't be spent on local roads. It can be spent on something like, Lester's Gate. It doesn't have to be just a primary. It could be a secondary road, but it has to function as a major collector road. So something like 693, it could be spent on. And in fact, I don't know if any of the board was here long ago to remember this one, but when we did Piney Woods Road, that was a very interesting exception to this rule. We used federal money to pave Piney Woods because for some reason Piney Woods was categorized as a collector road, a major collector. The only unpaved road I've ever seen that was categorized as a major collector.
There's a lot of traffic on that road.
It is, yeah.
That's a wide road. That's wider than Route 8.
Well, that's why it looks like that, because it was all federal money. We had to spend it. It's the only place we could spend it at the time.
That portion is wider than Route 8. Get us some more of that money for Paul
Yeah.
School.
Supervisor Bone.
I have two questions, clarifying questions. One is Taylor Hollow Road. So you said eventually be paved a mile up. But I would almost, and I'm not sure if this is the right kind of money, but I would prefer less paving if you shore up those curves where they drop off immediately, like you did with that one near the low water bridge. Is that the same money?
No, we can do maintenance money
Okay.
to do some of that.
Okay, perfect. And then-
And if it looks like it's a big enough job, we can use construction money for maintenance. You could take a little bit of construction money if it looked like if we could define a specific project. We would use that. Sometimes we call that what we call traffic services. That's a kind of a broad category, but that zero priority traffic services, we could do something that if it's outside kind of what our normal maintenance, we could also use the safety and operational funds for that.
I think I counted, and I'm probably wrong, like 7 more curves that drop off and are carving into the road kind of thing. So I don't know how we can get y'all to look at that a little bit sooner than later, but I would appreciate that.
Okay.
Secondly, Dry Run Road is one of those roads that has paving to a certain point, stops, and then paving at the other end. What's the difference between that and the 0.3 of a mile of Craig Mountain Road? Other than the distance.
Yeah,
because
Dry
it's a
Run,
lot
I think
longer.
when we did Dry, the only things in Dry Run, maybe some of the ends might be paved, and then we put in low water structured pipe in there and probably paved some approaches to it.
Personally, it seems to me that more paving has to be around you got to start on the high end of Mount Tabor and pave, fix those low water or those pipes and stuff like that. And then when you get some more money, pave to the next one. So, because if you don't fix what's up,
Right.
it's going to just keep making a
Sending
mess.
rocks all the way down, yeah.
I don't know. That would be for this list too, at some point in time.
Yes, that
in
would
the
be, that would definitely be a 6-year plan project, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other follow-up? Mr. Clark, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your
Okay.
service.
And like I said, you all can consider comments and other ideas, and hopefully on the next month at this time, we can pass a resolution to approve whichever plan you decide on.
Very good.
All right,
Thank
thank you.
you, sir. Thank you. We'll close that public hearing. Moving on to the next public hearing, amend FY 2021-22 budget.
Madam Chair, this is, and board members, this is just a formality that we have to undergo anytime we have a budget amendment that is going to exceed 1% of the county's total expenditures. Since we're appropriating the funds later this evening for the Christiansburg High School project, that's a little bit more than 1% of our adopted budget. So we have to have a public hearing for anyone who wants to make comments from the public on that item.
Absolutely. I don't have anybody signed up, but if anybody would like to come forward to speak on this public hearing for the amendment to the budget, you may come forward. You'll have 4 minutes if you'll state your name and address. Seeing no one come forward, I will close this public hearing. Next up, public address. Public address is the time for citizens to make their comments and address the board. The board does not respond. I have a sign-up sheet. After I call the names on the sign-up sheet, if you'd like to come forward, you may. You'll have 4 minutes. You need to state your name and address. All comments must be directed to the chair and other supervisors from the speaker's lectern. At the front of the room, please begin by stating your name and address. Debate between the speakers and members of the audience will not be allowed. Speakers may leave any written statements or comments to the supervisors with the board clerk. Speakers will be judged out of order should the speaker engage in personal attacks, use of profanity, abusive language, and debate with the audience and not address the supervisors. You will have 4 minutes if you'll state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Johnny Ashley. I live at 2675 Glade Drive. I want to say I'm always impressed by that VDOT guy. He knows every street in the county, and he can name off what improvement, what happened, what year. Wow. I am here to speak about the family court reform and the law enforcement response to crimes committed in it. This is our 12th time meeting. I've heard a lot about local politics, and I know one of the issues is giving teachers pay raises. The state offered the county a small amount of money for those raises, but only if the county pays a large amount of money. I was listening to the lady from the school board speak to you, specifically about raising taxes to come up with that money. And we might disagree on things. Like, I think it's wrong for strangers to commit adoption fraud by exchanging goods and services with the mom for custody of our child and then go to court and perjure themselves to make sure I can never get custody. And even though I've never failed a drug test or had any crimes that would keep me away from children, you'll put me in jail if I don't pay child support. I've had a dozen chances to say it's wrong, so I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree on that one. But besides being a crime victim, I am also a taxpayer. And here's how the school can make the money for themselves. In sex ed, they just need to tell the girls that whether they have 1 or 3 children with the guy, she'll still get the same percentage of his check in child support. If they have 3 kids with 3 guys, they'll triple the amount of child support payments. Social Security Act Title IV says that the federal government will match what the state collects in child support. So since the money is for general funding, it can be sent to the school for the teachers' salaries. On the other hand, this might get a little bit complicated. I'll go tell them myself. And if you're going to support this, you need to learn how to game the system so you can make the most money possible, since that's what this is really all about. You look at me and you see a dollar sign. I'll prove it. You have a lawyer up there, right? He's heard everything I've had to say. Am I wrong about anything? Show him the access video. I say the same things in it that I say here. Lawyer, does Melanie Atkins call an accurate description of the family court system delusional? We all know she did. And when the county mental health agency got paid insurance and Medicaid money, can any of you produce evidence that you've contacted the mental health agency and told them that they are falsely detaining people? The sheriff's department told me that if a private doctor falsified medical records to force someone to undergo unnecessary medical procedures while charging Medicaid and insurance, they'd be arrested. But since it's a government entity, it's okay. Tyranny. Rules for thee, but not for me. That's why Sic Semper Tyrannis is written on the wall. So as peasants know, you will always be tyrants. Now, I've been asking and no one can tell me. Does your mental health agency receive more funding if more suicides happening? I bet they do. And that's why they falsify medical records and lie about facts. Why else would they try to make suicidal people more suicidal? Once again, I'd like to request that the sheriff just come up here and explain how, even if it meets the definition of abduction, if the act happens in the family court, he, quote, doesn't take it seriously. He should say that and put it on the sheriff's department's Facebook page and see if his constituents take it seriously. Thank you. Y'all have a good evening.
If anybody else would like to come forward to address the Board of Supervisors, you'll have 4 minutes to do so. Seeing no one come forward, I will close the public address. Next up, addendum.
No addendum this evening, Madam Chair.
Very good. Next on the agenda, into work session. Do I have a motion to move into work session to talk about county capital improvement plan?
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fitchukowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Good.
Board members, I'd like to recognize Mark Magruder this evening. We just sent a note to turn it up another 2 degrees. I sent you a note. We wanted to recognize Mark this evening. If you recall, back during the middle of budget season, we talked about this little thing called a 5-year CIP, and we gave you a nice book with information in it regarding the CIP, and then we moved on to some other projects like the budget and like some debt issues and a few things that we had going on. We have continued to work on the CIP and refining some of the numbers, and Mark's going to give you an update on that this evening. I also want to take an opportunity to just go through those projects with you in a little more detail, try to hopefully get a little direction, and if everybody feels good about where we are at the end of this work session, hopefully maybe take an action under new business this evening. So Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I wanted to add a few words before
I'm
Mark
sorry,
starts.
I was going to turn it
That's
over to
okay.
Angie. It says right here, turn it over to Angie.
So Mark came and presented to you guys on the 28th of March. What this process is, it's different this year than we've had before, and he explained at that time about the buy-in that we got from different department heads and so forth, and we also provided you with a document that night. We have a few copies of those if you'd like to look at them. The numbers in the presentation tonight are not going to exactly match the numbers in the book, and I wanted to review a little bit about why we're using this approach. These cost estimates are based on the scope, level, and probable costs of the projects, and we use similar projects of similar size for similar purposes, but we have to keep in mind that they are just estimates at this point. We haven't had any kind of architectural or engineering studies to validate the numbers. They are estimates. And as we know, the economy right now and material and labor supply is in an uncertain state, so we'll move forward as best we can. We're going to present new projects tonight, so that's why the book doesn't exactly match Mark's presentation. There are some projects that have been completed that have an additional part added to them that will be in the presentation, and we ordered the projects based on how much discussion we think that they will generate. We could be wrong, but we tried to put the easier topics that will be easier to discuss first, and then save the items that we felt like might be more generate more discussion at the end of that.
Very good. Thank you, Angie. And if I'd looked at my notes, I would have called on you before I called on Mark. So Mark, thank you. Please lead us through, sir.
Okay, so tonight I'm going to do something a little different. You know, normally I do like a formal presentation, and then we get to the end, and then I ask if there's questions. So tonight what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of go slowly and then let you guys chime in as we go, so that if you have questions about a particular project, you don't have to wait to the end in order to ask those. I wanted to give a brief overview. Like Angie said, only new projects are going to be presented in this presentation tonight, or existing projects that required additional money in order to complete the project. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a brief description of each project, and then I'm going to talk about the project period, which in this particular instance is going to be when design and construction is planned to take place. I'm going to talk about a period cost, which is the cost that is in the CIP window. In other words, the CIP is from fiscal year 23 to 27. And so that particular period is the cost we're speaking about. And then I'm going to talk about the funding source, whether those funds are coming from bond funds that were just issued, whether the funding is coming from ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funds, or whether or not they're direct cash to capital projects. Okay, so the first project that we're going to talk about is the government center improvements. This project consists of the construction of new offices in the administration suite and the customer service areas for the Commissioner of the Revenue, planning and zoning, building inspections, and potentially the registrar. The project period is fiscal year 23 to 25. The cost during that period is $1 million, and the funding source is bond money. The board appropriated $750,000 to date on that project of that $1 million. And this particular project is, at this point, focused on at least the $750,000 is the county administration suite improvements and the Commissioner of the Revenue improvements. So I will stop at that point, and if you guys want to, or we can move to the next project.
Anyone have any questions, comments? Good. Supervisor Bone?
So the remaining $250,000 will finish up the rest of the offices.
That's
Is that what
correct.
you're- So, but once you start, you're gonna just go right through the building? Is that
That's-
how it's gonna go?
that's
You're gonna have
correct.
like one contractor do everything, one section and then the next section and the next, how are you doing?
I'm
We'll
not
do the-
exactly.
We'll do the first two sections that you've already talked about. The Commissioner of Revenue's going to start very shortly, and then the county admin suite will follow after that, and then we'll look again to see which one follows, if it's appropriate timing to do that. But you haven't appropriated the funds for that, so that would come before you before we begin that.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mark, I had a question, and so this will be security issues as well for these updates in the counter services?
Yeah, I think that there's several things going on there. We're trying to improve it for not only security, but part of this was social distancing related stuff related to COVID related items.
Okay, very good. Anyone else? Okay, continue.
Okay, the next two projects are combined on one slide. Again, we talked about this earlier. I think Supervisor DeMott asked me about why there were separate library projects when there's potentially two libraries that need to be replaced. And so again, these were smaller improvements that we thought we could knock out. One in Blacksburg, that project is to provide greater use of available outdoor area by constructing enhanced patio, seating, an amphitheater space, accessible ramps, and a perimeter wall. Again, these were designed around these COVID-related things where we could do outdoor events and have some social distancing. The project period is fiscal year 23. The cost is roughly $400,000, and the funding source is ARPA money. For the Christiansburg project, again, it's similar in scope. Provide easier access to the existing outdoor area and patio, and construct at least 2 study telemedicine spaces in the current alcove near the entryway. Again, the project period is fiscal year 23. The cost is roughly $400,000, and this is split, the funding source is split between ARPA and bond money.
Pretty good? I'd like to say that, go ahead, Supervisor Bone.
I apologize. Where are you fitting an amphitheater at Blacksburg?
That's literally what I'm looking at.
I'm like, there is, yeah. Are you taking a parking lot?
I'm not exactly
I'm
sure.
looking,
Yeah.
I'll look and see if it's in the document. We can get that for you, or we could,
Yeah.
Well-
Anyway, would just like to understand that. It's pretty tight. Isn't a lot of green space. There's plenty of
it's
space.
between Draper Road and the existing facility.
There's a bus pull off. I don't know. Taking that hill maybe and putting the people in the middle of the road? I'm not sure.
Oh, we can let you know more about that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It came from the library and has been looked at by the county engineer. I think they have that worked out, but we'll get back to you on that.
Sounds good, thank you.
I was just going to add, because that outdoor space, especially for story time, children access that, especially in the Blacksburg area where the walkable. And right now, but prior to COVID, they would do temporary fencing for those areas to block off a little bit of the traffic and stuff. But yes, and how much of that amphitheater, how many seatings, do we know?
No, did you just say?
The seating for the amphitheater, what type of space are we looking at? Because that is going to be tight.
The project that's listed in the document doesn't describe that, but we can get that for you as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
All right, the next project is the Christiansburg Library renovation. The renovation, this project would be the renovation and expansion of the Christiansburg Library. It would increase the square footage from roughly 15,000 square feet to nearly 32,000 square feet and provide a modern, flexible platform for library services to residents. The current facility is over 35 years old and is inadequate to meet today's needs. The project period is fiscal year 25 to 27. The cost during that time is $9.5 million, and the funding source is cash to capital. This particular project is part of the library's master plan, and if you remember when I spoke of this earlier, there's actually a need for a renovation for the Christiansburg Library and the Blacksburg Library, but the library board wanted Christiansburg's renovation to come first, so that's why it's in this CIP.
And this is, of the entire CIP proposal, this is about, it's close to a third of the total CIP for the 5 years. This was one that, as Mark said, we've talked about. The library board had made it a priority in their long-term plan, but we had never really been able to identify a funding source. And as we worked with the funds that we obtained with the bond issue, and we had the opportunity to use the ARPA funds more freely for some other projects. As we looked at cash to capital, we realized this was one that we could slot in if the board wanted to do it.
Any comments or questions? Supervisor King?
I was just going to ask, are they going up? Like adding a second story? Because I'm looking at the land for that one. And that one's pretty landlocked as well. Not really.
It really doesn't discuss exactly how the construction will take place, but we can certainly get that information for you.
I don't think they plan to build a second story. I don't think they do plan to build a second story, but as the time grew nearer, we would let you know what their exact plan is for that.
I think probably because on our end, we weren't necessarily expecting to have the funding, they might not also have the answers. So I don't ask that question as a judgment statement, but just kind of like...
Seeking more information.
Yeah, seeking more information because they're currently taking up a lot of the lot.
Yeah.
So...
We'll get that for you.
Thanks.
It may be included in the feasibility study, the facility study that Craig referenced, but I've not looked at that in a long time, so we'll get back to you on that.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think that's a good, it came up in that discussion just now too, as we talk about a 5-year CIP and allocating funds. Again, this is a conceptual thing that we would approve and start working on. It would give us direction on how to move forward with capital plans. As these projects come up for funding, they will come back before you to be discussed and funded at that point in time. This is this is a planning document. It's not, once we're done the board votes and there's all the money for all the projects. The projects have to come back to you for final appropriation and approval.
And just a quick
Supervisor.
question on that. This $400,000 for fiscal year 23, all right, when it comes back up to the project period 25 and 27, the whole library renovation is not going to wipe out this 400,000 we done spent?
No, it's two separate things. In other words, we were trying to knock those smaller projects out. Whether you did it or not, you were going to have to do those other things. In other words, it's not going to affect what we did on the first.
Both those projects are part of the bigger master plan for both libraries. So we would be checking off a little bit of the project. And then when we did the big project, it would just be built in addition to that.
We would make sure that the small project was in the right place so that when we did the bigger project, it wouldn't get wiped out.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Makes sense? Anyone else? Okay.
All right, the next project is the Falling Branch Corporate Park Phase 2. This particular project, the scope has changed since the original project was put in the CIP. But the original project is a 100-acre parcel to expand the existing Falling Branch Corporate Park, and will be developed in a similar fashion to Phase 1 with pre-graded lots, roads, and utilities. This project was originally submitted and proposed in the fall of 2021. The project period was fiscal year 23. The cost during that period was $5.4 million, $3.9 million in new funds, and the funding source is cash to capital. And again, there's been some development out there, and there's been some changes with the scope of this particular project. So we have some flexibility on how we can use these funds, particularly because they're cash to capital funds. So the board can make the decision on how they want to spend that accordingly. There's no restrictions.
Any questions, comments?
Next project is the Creed Fields Park lighting. Again, we were at the opening ceremonies for Creed Fields the other week. This would be basically doing the lighting for that facility. So the Creed Fields project is approximately 15 acres in eastern Montgomery County. And again, this project is focused on just the lighting piece of that. The project period is fiscal year 23. The cost is $1.1 million, and the funding source is bond money and cash to capital.
Any comments or questions? Supervisor DeMont?
Just have a teensy comment / question. This will light all of the new fields, right?
That's correct.
I really, really like this one. I'm very happy to see it, just because we have such limited field access as a county anyways. If we can light them, it means we can use them later for the older kids.
Nighttime tournaments, right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the next project is Auburn Park. Auburn Park is approximately 35 acres located off of Route 8 in Reiner. This park will have baseball fields, softball fields, multi-purpose fields, lighting, restroom facilities, playground, picnic shelter, and walking trails. The project period is fiscal year 23. The period cost is $7.6 million. There's $6.5 million in new funds on this project during that time period. Funding source is bond money and cash to capital. I just wanted to point out there's no indoor recreation space on this project. So if we were to entertain that at a later time, those additional costs would have to be added to this particular project.
Any questions or comments? Supervisor Bone?
The grading out there is completed, is that true, or close to completion? But that money's not in this either. Is that true?
The money that was appropriated for grading is not included in this, and I don't think that it is complete. The grading is not complete.
But we're not expecting to need any more money for grading. The money that was appropriated for grading should be enough. Is that correct?
Yes, or if we need a little bit more money for grading, it would be included in this number. If the scope of the project changed, as Mark described, that could change how things are graded.
Thank you.
Grading should be done in June is what it has in this book for us.
I go
We'll
by,
start building, Todd.
Mark and I go by it at least twice a day. There's still a lot of activity going on out there.
Mark, on this, was the original cost projected at $10 million?
That's the total cost of the project. That includes monies that have already been appropriated that are live and play right now, plus the new monies. Part of it is, like Craig was saying earlier, on each one of these projects, the board will appropriate X number of dollars. The appropriation occurs in 1 year, but then those dollars are spent several years out. So part of those monies that have already been appropriated are being spent like in the current year and in the next couple years. So that's why you're seeing a total project cost of $7.6 million, but yet we only needed to add $6.5 million in new money because part of that money's in play right now from previously being appropriated.
Yes, sir. Very good.
All right, the next project is Cinnabar Green Space and Storage. This project consists of demolishing the old garage facility and old animal shelter and constructing a large green space area, a parks and recreation storage building, and a livestock area for animal care and adoption center. The project period is fiscal year 24 to 26. The period cost during that time is $2.4 million, and the funding source is bond money. There's been some talk about some office space as an additional option, but that option is not included in these project costs at this point.
Questions or comments from the board?
Office space for what?
There's potential as we continue to look at growth for the future for office of elections and some of those functions, that it might be a good place to have space. We've also talked about at some point in the future, perhaps space for parks and recreation offices. So that would be a potential. But right now, what's been proposed in the CIP is to just create a green space area, and that would be future discussions. It's not included right now.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Supervisor Bone?
Do we have any idea the total number of acreage over there amongst all these spaces, including the disc golf? I'm assuming the disc golf is kind of right next to.
We can get that. Part of that's the old county landfill. Part of it is the frog pond. Part of it's just, we can accumulate that and
I think
get
that would be great. Thank you.
It is a nice piece of property over there. Some of it's an old landfill, but it's a nice piece of property.
Thank you.
And I never thought when we were talking about the Animal Care and Adoption Center, we'd ever have a need for a livestock holding facility, but we get livestock.
Yep. We get everything.
Yes, we do.
All right, the next project's the new Shawsville Rescue Squad facility. Shawsville Volunteer Rescue Squad has outgrown their current facilities, which would require significant restorations and/or additions in order to continue to function for their particular needs. Currently, Shawsville Volunteer Rescue Squad stores equipment in 3 separate buildings. The project period is fiscal year 23 to 25. The cost during that period is $4.7 million, and the funding source is ARPA money. I just would like to point out the existing buildings are currently not owned by the county, so.
Comments? Supervisor
Yes.
Fidzikowski?
Yeah, I don't know if any of you have had a chance to go to the rescue squad building, but for those of you that have, this is
Fix it.
so high up on the priority list, it's ridiculous, because to say that they've outgrown it is being very kind, because it's way more than just outgrown. It doesn't function properly. They are so crammed in there that there's no room for anything. This is something that really, really needs to take place for the community. And it not only benefits our expansion of the rescue services that we're providing down there, not just that, but this is also a good way of possibly bringing in more volunteers. Because when they have a decent place to work, let's face it, all of us, we've had jobs. If it's a pleasure to go to work, you like going to work. So hopefully that will happen too. And I know I've discussed other areas in the Shawsville, Elliston vicinity that are, so much of it is in floodplains and what have you. And I still believe that a real viable location is going to be probably the old baseball field. But until we get more plans and nail stuff down, I'm certainly not committed to that. But and I don't think this board is either. But it definitely is screaming that it's a good location. So yeah, I just can't say enough about this. This is so needed. It's shouldn't even be discussed. Should just click your fingers and make it happen.
Make it happen.
And I would add to that, Steve, that it's been discussed for a long, long, long time. And volunteers, even, gosh, I don't even know how many years ago had, contacted board members about it. And you're exactly right. There's no space there when you go in.
Any other?
A lot of that's down there. You got air conditioning in some spots you don't have air conditioning. So, you people that's been there a while, it's hard for them to travel up the steps where the air conditioning is. And I'd like to see us move forward with that one quick.
And I would like to point out that this cost estimate does not include additional land. It's just for the structure.
Well, that land Steve's talking about, we already own it.
That's right. That's why it doesn't include any cost.
Can you get you a shovel tonight, Steve?
I have two. I'll let you borrow one.
Mark, I see that this is for ARPA money. Is there a deadline or that it has to be spent?
Yeah, there is a deadline. I think it's
4 and 26.
Yeah, the money has to be obligated by, I think, December 31st, 24. And then it has to be spent by December 31st, 26. So the timeline that we've put forward in the CIP would have it complete by then.
I agree that this is a need for our community for that. And did you say we do not own the buildings currently?
No.
No, Charlottesville Rescue Squad is the only one that is owned by the board of the Rescue Squad Association. So that property will remain with that board, and it'll be up to them as to what they want to do with it.
Any other questions or comments?
Could, since we need to have this money spent and gone, could we, leave it up to Steve, but is there something we need to do to go ahead and move this project? Because, material and all this other stuff, it's going to take a while.
Well, that's a good segue into talking about before we get to the last project. The plan tonight, if the board is good in concept with these projects, is to adopt the county's capital improvement plan. That's on your agenda under new business. That will put the wheels in motion on everything we've talked about, with the understanding is we've talked about these project periods and the funding sources, the ones that are ARPA funded and are coming up in sooner rather than later. Those will come back to you as soon as we have more definitive numbers. Again, right now, we don't have any design, we don't have anything. So once we go back to staff and our leadership team and say the board's approved the CIP, these are the projects, let's get going, we'll come back to you as soon as we can with some more definitive numbers before you move forward. So you'll have a better feel for what you're allocating when we ask you to allocate it.
We would likely come for a smaller appropriation to get some work done to help us get the
Preliminary.
estimates, the cost estimates.
And then could we set a priority list of
Yes,
we
ma'am.
would like to move forward on these projects first?
Yes.
I'm hearing pretty strongly this was
This is
one of the top.
strong. Supervisor Bone.
So, we build buildings to last many, many years and for the county to continue to grow. And the whole CIP process, is everything built for 30 years
Yes.
plus?
Yes, it is.
Assuming that the population will grow at the same rate?
Yes,
Okay.
that is taken into account.
Thank you.
Now, one more thing.
Yes, sir.
The volunteers will be involved with this.
Yes, sir. We will certainly seek out their guidance and input on that as well. And I want to echo what Supervisor Fidjakowski said. I hope that it is an opportunity to revitalize that Shawsville squad.
I think it will be.
And the last fire department we built, it's ready for 50 years.
Very good.
Sir.
Thank you.
All right, the last project is the old sheriff's office renovation with Sallyport. Again, this is a project that has not been presented to the board in this form. This project would allow the county to relocate the magistrate's office and the court services unit and places these functions in close proximity to the courthouse and the jail. Project also increases the safety of officers transporting prisoners to the jail as well as the community by the addition of a functional Sallyport. The project period for this project is fiscal year 23 to 25. The cost during that period is $4.7 million, and the funding source, again, is ARPA funds.
This is a project that we spoke about several years ago as the renovation of the former sheriff's office for court services and the magistrate. Since that time, we have, if you will, mothballed the building to ensure that it would be suitable for use should we decide to move forward with a renovation. However, during that time as well, there's been some additional discussion regarding the overall public safety of the layout of that entire area, and also the benefit of having some connectivity to the jail related to a Sallyport, which is why this project has changed somewhat since we last spoke to you about it. And I know I've heard several board members that have had thoughts on this in several areas. So if you noticed, we saved this one to last because we talked today that this would probably be the one that generated some discussion. So
Certainly. So I will go around the room. Supervisor Bone.
This space is very landlocked. So I want to make sure that whatever we do put there is there for whether it's 50 years or what have you. But I think this is one of the most important projects because the pure safety of individuals, and we don't have that problem in the other projects. So I would think that this would be the #1 project to move forward. Now, granted, it will probably take longer, but to have it as a #1 priority, I think is well worth all the efforts for this county, specifically for safety reasons. And as far as I'm concerned, as far as the cost is concerned, I'm not saying it's unlimited by any means, but let's just do the right thing for that space. And I'm good with it, but I'm glad that we're talking about it. Thank you.
Supervisor DeMont.
I don't really have anything to add other than I think I agree with Supervisor Bond. I think that it is a very high priority to eliminate the magistrate across the street situation as quickly as possible. And I think we're well positioned to have, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, Craig, but I think we can have a couple of these going on at the same time. Do we have the capacity within our staff to manage multiple projects?
we have the capacity to manage a number of projects if we are also allowed to use some contract support to do that. We are very lean and mean, and that's one thing, when we first put this book together, it was like, whew, wow. All these wouldn't be going on at the same time, and the ones that would be going on, if they run on similar tracks, we would have an A&E firm or a third party assisting us with contract administration and construction.
So I really appreciate that. Just looking at this, just on dollar amounts alone, the combination of the Shawsville Rescue Squad and this renovation are 10 million almost. So almost the same as the library, and even running two $5 million projects. That's two people, that's two full-time jobs to run those projects.
Yes, ma'am.
So I would hate to put staff in a compromised position. I'm glad that there's support available.
Thank you. When we've done large projects in the past, like when we did the courthouse, and then also when we did the renovation of the old courthouse for the public safety building, we had a contract. What was his title? Do you remember what we called him?
Project manager.
Thank you. A contract project manager that reported, he answered to the county, but he was a third-party independent person that helped us.
Yeah, I think it would be for health and safety reasons of the list that Mark has given us tonight. I think those two are the highest priority to move forward as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Supervisor Fidzikowski.
Yeah, this is another capital project that I feel very strongly about, and I agree also with Supervisor Bone that this needs to be a priority because of the way we have everything spread out right now, and it's just it's messy, and it can't be very efficient like that. And the facilities we're renting for a magistrate's office, so that says it all right there. But the court services facility, I've never been in there, but I can't imagine that fits anybody's bill. And it's also with the dual purpose, using the basement as storage. So, those are two good reasons. But now I'm going to go back to when we addressed this several years ago. And we looked at it, and it was a close vote, as I recall, but we voted to renovate part and do some adjustments to it. But now, the original plan, and I'm not saying we're not going to get another plan, I'm sure we are, but the original plan that we looked at had everything kind of backwards. It had the police dealing with the magistrate the furthest away from the jail, and the court services the closest to the jail. Now, we all know we don't put children in jails. They have their own place that they go to. So it was kind of backwards. So I am just very concerned that all that gets corrected, and also with the addition of a functional sally port. For those in law enforcement, you reduced the possibility of escapes when you enclose the prisoner and the car and everything in one room. And it's all monitored. There's help available right there within seconds, not minutes, not having to wait for somebody to come screaming into the parking lot. So it really makes sense to take care of that, because just the money in lawsuits that we would save, it would pay for this and probably several more. But the safety issue can't be overemphasized, and so it has to be done smartly. Now, one of the reasons that we voted the way we did a few years back was because we were going to save $400,000 or $500,000 by renovating part of it. At the time, I was against that, and to be honest, I'm still against it, because Supervisor Bone brought up the issue of how long will they last. And to me, a new, modern design building is going to last 30 years. When we renovate something, yes, it'll look like brand new, but I don't know about the bones of it. I don't know if the bones will last 30 years. So that's my concern. My other concern is, I'm not so sure that, I think it was Thompson and Litton that actually did the rough
Yes, sir.
drawing. I don't know how they would look at it now by reversing everything and how they would make that fit. Because the whole complex, as you know, is kind of chopped up. You have the old brick on the old 911, well, it was the dispatch center for the sheriff's office, which originally I thought would make great magistrate office. It's got that bulletproof glass in it and all that other stuff, but it doesn't have the room. Then you have the old historic part that I know several of you wanted to save because it was historic, but I'm not really sure how historic it was. I don't remember what year it was built in. It certainly wasn't as old as another building that we had torn down because of its condition. And I'm not so sure what the condition of it is now. I know we spent money putting air handling unit on there to keep the mold from growing and all that, but that may have to be revisited because if it's going to take that much remediation, it may not be the saving feature that several of you were looking for. So I think we need to look at this all three of those buildings that are all stuck together. I think we need to look at it with fresh eyes and get some new numbers and see where that goes, because this county has probably one of the finest courthouses in, I'm going to start in Central Virginia and come all the way west. And the same thing with our public safety building, our sheriff's office. It's top notch. And I would hate to see us put something in there that doesn't equal that and last as long as they will. And as Forrest Gump said, that's all I've got to say about it.
Supervisor King.
Well, I like this project. I think we need to move forward with it. And as Steve was talking about a while back when we voted to renovate, it also helps preserve some of the history. And I'm all for that. And I think, you know, back then they said it'd save us $500,000 if we renovated. Well, I think that would cover the Sally Port that's added to this project. I mean, I may be wrong, but I think we need to move forward with this one and renovate it, because just my opinion is, you know, we asked the school system, you know, renovate schools. So I think we need to look at every building if we need to build one or renovate it, because we asked the schools to renovate and they renovate to save money. And I think this board needs to do the same.
Supervisor Shepherd.
I'm in agreement. We really need it, and should be high on the priority list. For probably very first off is the officer safety, functionality, and it'll be saving us money in rent. So I'm all for it. Let's move on it.
Vice Chair Biggs.
I'm with Steve on this. This project and the project with the rescue squad are like my top two. Okay, our number one thing is public safety of our citizens. And the way we have it right now is not a good thing. One of the things that I understand what you're saying, Todd, about the renovation, but one of the things we really need to think about is what is going to fit in there that will go, as Steve said, with the public safety building and the courthouse. And as Sarah pointed out, if there's something that we're going to do, like if it's a new facility, how are we going to make it so that it can be added to in the future? Because as the county grows, our public safety needs grow. That includes maybe people not doing what they should be doing. So, looking at this, I think a lot of issues come up. Like if we make this so we have everything at one place, do we have enough parking? Have we talked to the sheriff's office? Have we talked to the sheriff? Have we talked to folks about that are the boots on the ground about what is it they think they need for this? I'm not an expert. I don't know. And Steve, that was a good point you brought up about how the original plan was backward, I mean, so we need to get some input as this goes forward to really, I would suggest that we talk with the sheriff's office too and the people that are over there as to, how things work. But yeah, I think we really need to get moving on this because it is a public safety issue and none of us want anything to happen on our watch that would be detrimental to our citizens or to our law enforcement officers. So that's the way I feel about it. Whether that means, Todd, we can't renovate for some reason, like Steve said, the bones of the building. We need to look at it, as you said, Steve, with fresh eyes, look at it and see what's best to do. And that's the way I feel about it.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm very pleased with the board's agreement that this should be the number one priority because it has been a priority of mine for some time. And during one of the very first work sessions when I came on board, when we talked about this project, it was talked about prior to me being elected, but then on one of our first work sessions, I was in support of because of the functionality, because of the limitation in sizes and the room space, and because of it, as Supervisor Fidzikowski said, it's kind of backwards where the Sally Port and the magistrate's office should be directly right there at the jail. I was in favor of doing a complete, or looking at funding and cost effective, of course, to do a new building because as the county grows, so will the needs. And we're talking about putting the magistrate's office in there, court services, adding the Sally Port. So this is a need, and we are landlocked. So we also have to consider about we want to build it and not come back in 15 years and say, oh, now we need to build more or add more or have to rent another facility. That doesn't make good sense. Plus, we need to look at the fact of Vice Chair Biggs brought up parking. We already do not have a lot of parking there, so we want to. I'm in favor of moving this as priority, but looking at what it will cost. I know we had to do some air conditioning and just to keep it maintained because there were problems while it sat there. So again, we want to make sure that it's done correctly as good stewards of our taxpayers' money, but we don't want something that we are already going to be at capacity. It's not functional, and then we have to look at renting another place because that's one issue this board constantly looks at is space, capacity, and of course the first thing that this board has already agreed upon is public safety. Safety for our citizens, safety for our officers. So the Sally Port is a necessity to make sure that when the officers bring in prisoners that they can be secured, the car secured. It just makes a lot of sense. So I'm in favor of moving forward, but looking at this, as Super Fidzikowski said, fresh eyes to look at what will be the best function so that this is 25, 35 years that it's going to be able to serve in capacity, not something that we renovate and then in several years the boards will have to look at what do we do now. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to, even if we renovate and we run out of space, then we're going to be in a situation where we're going to rent more space and it's not going to be accessible to the courthouse, to the public safety, to the jail. And that was the whole reason why we are combining everything together for the security and safety of our law enforcement, our magistrates, our court service folks, and of course our citizens. So I think this should be priority number one, and then the Shawsville Rescue Squad priority two. So that means more work for you, Mark, to come back with some consensus of the board to look at maybe some new figures. And two, we understand that this is just a rough estimate that you really haven't know for sure until we start looking into design and the space capacity for that.
And we did build a factor into the cost estimates when we put them together, but the full impact of COVID wasn't known at that point on the construction industry, so we will have to definitely look at that and make sure that everyone is on board with the more accurate estimates.
Yep, and at risk of sounding like a broken record again, the CIP plan is a planning document. It's a tool that once the board adopts it, gives guidance to the staff as to the priorities and moving things forward. So we will, once we get this adopted, if that's the board's desire, that'll help us with the leadership team set priorities, and you'll start hearing a lot real soon on several of these.
And part of the reason that we included these two items that you have spoken of as being your highest priority with ARPA funding is because we knew that needed to be spent more quickly, and we felt like they might be your top priorities. We need to spend the ARPA money and then the bond proceeds more quickly, of course, than the cash to capital funding.
And talking to court services, to the sheriff, and to the magistrates, this is a need. They are anxiously waiting for this too. And so we've been talking about this for quite a while. So I would be happy for us to start tomorrow, if we can. Supervisor Bone.
One more question, and I don't know how to phrase this question better, so just bear with me. It's not posed properly, okay? So when I say, because this is landlocked and all the safety and all this kind of, makes sense to build it for many decades, and that might mean bigger than we would ever consider needing. This is the part that I'm not saying properly. If that meant putting Parks and Services on the 4th floor of this, and I'm not saying this is going to be 4 floors, okay? But if we put some other department that needs space in this building until, maybe 5, 10 years later when they get their own building, maybe that makes sense. I don't know. What I'm saying is, because it's landlocked, we have one chance to get this right, and our county's growing, and I know that when, for example, the court building was built, it is full. It was full a couple years in, right? And it was supposed to be, however many decades. So building, quote unquote, an extra, this isn't the right way to say it either, an extra big building at this place just because it's landlocked. Those are the kinds of concepts that are in my mind to say, can we just make sure we explore different options to use our assets as well as we can? Thank you.
Absolutely. And one thing that to keep in mind on several of these projects we've discussed tonight, an important partner in these projects is going to be the town of Christiansburg, because the projects that are located in the town, we have to follow their guidelines as far as building and parking and those sorts of things. So especially with this one of the key discussions will be how this affects parking on the site, what amount of density we can put on that land. So this one is a very important project, and it will probably have a few complications that we have to work through as we move forward, but we'll get started.
Supervisor DeMonts.
I think this may be fiscally irresponsible, but I don't think we should put any other departments that are not law enforcement or criminal services or court services or magistrate related in the complex, just due to the sensitivity of what the business is of the complex. So if we built it oversized for future capacity, personally, I think it would be in our best interest to keep it vacant and maintained versus putting a department there that isn't law enforcement related.
Right, and that just, in other words, if that was the right solution, which it makes sense to me, maybe like X department has twice as much space as they need, just so that the space is used, because used space is actually maintained better than unused space kind of thing. Anyway, just wanted to kind of put that out there.
Thank you, Supervisor DeMonts-Bone. And I agree with Supervisor DeMonts. You would not, because of the security and safety, it would almost be like a public safety building. We would not want to put Parks and Rec or something, but I understand the concept of using the space, utilizing it. I expect as we grow and as court services, and even looking at even possible drug court and things of that nature growing, those would be compatible
Yeah.
services and places that we could use that, because we do need the facility.
And I believe that was the end of the presentation, wasn't it?
Yeah, I want to do a little summary at the end here. So the projects that we talked about tonight allocates $10 million in ARPA funds, $10 million in bond proceeds, and the balance, which is roughly $14.5 million in cash to capital. And at this point, that's the complete presentation. If there's other questions I can answer before I step away, be glad to do that.
So Mark, just to reiterate with the board, to make sure I have everybody's consensus if that's needed. So priority would be the magistrate, for the court services magistrate building, to look at figures of, come back with figures of, to do a brand new building, facility, those type of costs, and Shawsville Rescue Squad. And then after we come back, after we vote on this as new business, we would move forward with this, and then you'd come back with more detailed information for us. And then we would finalize that priority list. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
I
And I
just-
think that when the projects come back to you, Scott Woodrum would probably be the person that would come, or someone from the A&E firm would come and share different conceptual ideas and cost estimates at that time.
Firm everything up, yes.
If it's possible at all to share priority on 1 and 2 so they can be executed simultaneously, that would be.
I think we
I
should
agree.
together.
I agree.
I think we've heard you loud and clear on that. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank the board for that support.
Thank you for the discussion. This is the first time in my tenure that we've worked through a list like this. This will become an annual, I mean, the projects will come to you as they're developed, but you'll get one of these every year. Some of the projects will be updated, some of the projects will come off. There'll occasionally be a new project or 2 or 3 that come on. So thank you very much for the time and discussion tonight on this. Very much appreciated.
Okay, do I have a motion to come out of work session? Oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Bone.
Part of the reason why this is an unusual list also is because of COVID and ARPA money. So we don't expect to ever get that kind of money ever
Thank you.
again.
Thank you.
So this is great practice, and I'm excited to have it every year. But we need to be sensitive in the types of projects or scope of projects moving forward, and that means starting now to, and I don't want to contradict myself too much because it probably sounds like it right now when I say, okay, let's make sure we do what's right for this public safety stuff building. But, if we don't spend all the money, that's okay too, because there's always a long list of things that we have to do every year moving forward. So, thank you.
Thank you for Supervisor Bone for bringing that up, that ARPA money is $10 million, that it will be one time, and that we want to be able to spend that quickly, because there's a time limit on that.
We've talked about the ARPA funding being really a once-in-a-generation opportunity to get some projects addressed, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay. A motion to come out of work session.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Okay, if we will take a quick 10-minute break right now, and we will come back in 10 minutes.
And we are aware, staff's aware of the coolness of the room.
It's perfect.
I want to go outside.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
it's being addressed as we speak. It's just not fixed yet.
Guys, yeah, that's probably what's wrong.
I'm sitting here sweating.
Yeah, see, it's blowing this way. Now, I will say it's
Not
warmed
enough to
up
have
a
a wood
little.
stove, evidently.
Next up, items of consent. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fitchukowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts? Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Moving on to new business. First up, county capital improvement plan.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Vice Chair Biggs?
I just want to commend the staff for coming up with this. It's something I really have been pushing for a long time because we have to, as Sarah said, we've got to plan for the future. And we also have to think about how we're going to pay for the future. And so this is a beginning step, and I think our county is to the point where we really needed this to happen. So thank you to Craig and staff for pulling all this together and really bringing it forward for us to really act on it. So thank you.
I would say echo ditto. All right.
Mr. Fitchukowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next, we have Public Service Authority bond issuance of Uland subdivision.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fitchukowski?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next up, appropriations of Montgomery County Public Schools VPSA bonds proceeds.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fitchukowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next, appropriation of county employee salary increase.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? I'd just like to, again, thank the staff and commend Supervisor King for bringing this to our attention during this pandemic and coming out of it. We appreciate all of our employees and all that they've done to step up.
Thank you, and the employees are very appreciative of the board as well for your support.
Very good. Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fitchukowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Reports, County Attorney. No report.
Come on, Marty.
County Administrator, Mr. Meadows.
One thing I'd like to share with you this evening is, as we have been working into the spring, the leadership team has been talking about our vision and mission among the leadership group, that as we move into summer and fall, we want to begin to work with the board on updating your vision and mission. One of the things that we've talked about is that we want to be seen as a nationally recognized local government, and that's kind of an audacious goal, but we got notice today that we are a nationally recognized local government because we had 2 applications to the National Association of Counties for Achievement Awards, and we won them both. Thank you. One was for our Extended Communicators Group that's been meeting to get out information regarding various events and activities going on in the county. That was recognized. And then our Animal Care and Adoption Center always has great things going on, and this was for the Return to Home program that they've been doing over there. And I can't thank Jen and her staff enough for putting that information together and getting it submitted. So we're a national award-winning local government. So,
Excellent. Congratulations.
one other thing I'll just mention, as I shared with the board earlier today, I spoke with the interim superintendent this afternoon, and because they have some issues with staff being available for tomorrow night's meeting, they asked that the joint meeting be postponed to a later date, and so we will be looking at another date in a few weeks. That's all I have.
Board reports. We'll start off with Supervisor DeMott.
I have no report other than to just note how wonderful the Parks and Rec Department did with the ceremony at Creed Fields. Jen helped me prepare some comments that I delivered when Supervisor Fedjakowski was unavailable, and thankfully I was not made to throw out the first pitch. That honor was reserved for a great-grandson of former Supervisor Gary Creed. I thought it was a very, very nice event that really showcased the children and former Supervisor Creed's family and legacy in the community. So it was wonderful.
Supervisor Bone?
Two things. I know that our fearless administrative leader, Mr. Meadows, is out and about in the community, communicating lots of stuff about what we're doing. And a perfect example was at his Rotary meeting, presenting, what's going on with the county. And it's important for the community to know that. So thank you for doing that. I also want to recognize our Sheriff Parton, Chief Sisson, and Captain Rowe, and Chief Mac Babb III. All were at the chamber talking about our public safety last Thursday, and they certainly did a super great job. I would highly encourage everybody to attend that one session that actually happens every year. They're doing their best to help us all keep safe and continue to live in a super great community, and I couldn't be more grateful, so thank you.
Supervisor Shepherd?
No report, just congratulations to the county for your awards.
Thank you.
It's very notable.
Thank you.
Supervisor Fedjakowski?
I only have regrets tonight. I regret that I wasn't at the Creed kickoff event, but I did follow up with it, and I'm glad that everybody had such a good time with such a great turnout, and I appreciate Supervisor DeMott's delivering the message, even though she may not want to throw a ball. I'm sure everything went fine, but that is just such a great tribute to Gary. This is something that he's always wanted. He was always big on sports, and to have a field there named after him, I think is quite an honor. I also regret missing out on the chamber meeting. I thought that the sheriff could probably use one more heckler, but I wasn't able to make that one either. So that's all the regrets I have so far.
Supervisor King?
Don't have no report, but I would like to thank everyone that works for the county, everybody that works for the school system, law enforcement in both towns, because these people is what makes Montgomery County a wonderful place to live. And I do appreciate every one of them.
Thank you, sir.
Vice Chair Biggs?
I just want to thank staff for the employee engagement, that everything was so well planned and so well executed. I also want to comment on, I unfortunately did not get to attend the event down in Shawsville, but I will tell you that Gary was smiling down because I know how important that was to him, having served with him the whole time he was on the board. What I would like to say about the chamber thing with the law enforcement, what was really interesting to me was here's a group of individuals and they don't have boundaries. And they made that clear. Like they're all in it, if somebody needs something in Blacksburg and Christiansburg has to come, or the sheriff has to come, or tech has to come, they're all in it. And I think you'll see that if you drive around, you'll see Blacksburg police cars in different places, and the sheriff's cars are all over. And I just wish sometimes that the rest of us involved in local government, and I'm not saying anything about our board, but I just wish sometimes we all could sort of embrace that same kind of thing where there aren't boundaries. We're all here for the citizens. That's the only reason I personally think we should be here in the first place. But I really thought that came out as a very strong statement. And I think we needed to hear that. So afterwards, Sarah and I were both there. It was sort of interesting. People that had to go to work, left and went to work. A lot of folks hung around just to talk to the officers and to the sheriff. There was a lot of engagement afterwards, so I thought that was a very positive thing. And that's it.
Very good. Several things. First of all, I want to say congratulations to all the graduates of the class of 2022 coming up this Saturday. I know we have some proud moms, including our own Supervisor DeMotts, who her son will be graduating. Wanted to commend the Employment Engagement Committee as well for all the activities and efforts that they gave and recognition and celebrating our public service employees. Also, I regret that I was unable to attend the law enforcement chamber event. I understand it was, of course, they're all rock stars, Mary. That's why everybody stays after for autographs. Hopefully not citation autographs, but autographs because they're rock stars. And you're absolutely right. We're very fortunate in Montgomery County that all of our law enforcement agencies and our sheriff's department have that mutual aid and mutual respect to work together to always provide and to serve our citizens. And with that, I want to remind everyone that this week, coming up May 15th through the 21st, is National Police Week, with Peace Officers Memorial Day being recognized May the 15th. And may we always thank our officers, our law enforcement, brave women and men that serve and sacrifice, and also to remember and pay tribute to those officers that have given the ultimate sacrifice. And with that, we will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.